Welcome to the Confidence Through Health podcast. My name is Jerry Snyder. As a health, wellness, and sports performance coach, my goal each week is to bring you experts to help you take control of your health and build your self-confidence. Thanks for including me today on your journey to better health. I want to say thank you to Social Media Cowboys for sponsoring this week's episode of the Confidence Through Health podcast. If you need help with a website, if you need social media needs for your business, if you need help with AdWords, SEO, all those things that you know you should be doing, but you are too busy to do or you're too confused about, they are the experts that you need in your corner. If you're interested in launching a podcast, such as mine, they help me edit my podcast and do a fantastic job making sure that all of the technical side of it is handled and we launch a nice, neat, edited podcast episode each week. So I want to thank Social Media Cowboys for their continued sponsorship of the Confidence Through Health podcast. You can find them at socialmediacowboys.com, or you can find them as well with other sponsors at confidencethroughhealth.com. So Andy, I want to thank you for being a guest on the Confidence Through Health podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate it.
So I'm excited to talk to you because and I've talked to other people in the health insurance world,
Mhm.
and talking about, why things are the way they are and how we got to where we are as a country with health insurance and how it's really, a sad state, really, from both the insurance and the
Mhm.
healthcare system as a whole. But what y'all do at Crowd Health is different from researching it and from looking at what you do. But before we get into the nuts and bolts of how that works, like what was the piece that was like, this is not working for me. I need to create something that does.
Yeah, I this is my second healthcare company. I sold my first one, and as such, I didn't have health insurance because most of us get health insurance through our employer.
Right.
And so I went to what I thought was the only option, which is the Affordable Care Act plans,
Hmm.
the marketplace plan. So I went and
Yep.
got a plan for me, my wife, and my two girls, and I think it was 11 or 1200 bucks a month. And I was like, all right, well, I guess, I'll just, this is my only option, so I'll go with
Right.
it. And I kind of
Right.
joke it worked until I had to use it. My little one was one at the time, and she was having recurring ear infections. And so we went to the ear, nose, and throat doctor who told us that she had a hole in her eardrum. In essence, the fluid in her ears were getting so bad that it popped her eardrum. And
Hmm.
she was, having pain as a result of the pressure. And so
Sure.
said, no big deal. Just put tubes in her ears. It's a 15-minute procedure and it'll fix the problem. Like, great. He actually got pre-authorized from the insurance plan to do this procedure. And so we went and got it done. It was a 15-minute procedure, just like he had said. I think we were there for a total of like 45 minutes or an hour or something like that. And a few weeks later, I got the bill and it was $8,000. I was just like, holy crap, $8,000 for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
But like, this is the whole point of health insurance. This is why we have health insurance, right?
Right.
Um, Little did I know that I was going to get something in the mail a few weeks after that from my health insurance company who said it was medically unnecessary and so they weren't going to pay for it. And I was just like, man, I did everything right. I went in
Yeah.
network, my doctor got it pre-approved, all this stuff, and you're not going to pay for it. And so we went through two rounds of an appeals process. They're still like, nope, we're not paying for it. And so it was at that
God.
point where I was just like, look, man, if you're not going to pay my bills, I'm not going to pay your bills. And so I quit.
Yeah.
So essence, I became uninsured. And so I told my wife that we were uninsured, and she's like, "So what do we do now?" And so it took me about 12 to 18 months to kind of figure out like ultimately if I paid in cash,
Hmm.
paid directly, it was going to be way less expensive. And in fact,
Yeah.
I had an ear, nose, and throat doc reach out and was like, "Yeah, we do these for like I think it was like 15 or $1,700 all day long." And I'm
Yeah.
like, "Why did I pay $8,000 when I could have gotten it for $1,500?"
Right.
It was then I realized that this health insurance is just a racket.
Yeah.
In essence, what I thought was these big health insurance companies, huge, United Health, $500 billion a year is using their power to get better prices.
Hmm.
But in reality, what I found out is that they're actually incentivized to see prices go up. They make
Right.
more money when prices go up.
Yeah.
They make more money when I'm sick.
Right.
And as a result, they're not getting me the best prices.
Yeah.
And what I found was is I pay directly, I get way better prices than the health insurance plan. So I kind of
Right.
thought, man, what can we do? Can we build a platform that enables people to pay their doctors directly, and therefore get way better prices than health insurance? And so
Right.
ultimately, that was kind of the conclusion that I got to. And so in essence, what we've done is built this platform where you can go and pay your doctor directly, whether it be for, a little pediatric visit, or you tear your ACL, or
Mhm.
you have a big ER visit, or you have cancer. If you pay directly, you're getting, way, way better prices. And so,
Yeah.
that's ultimately, what I came to realize. And I was just totally ignorant of
Yeah.
that fact before this specific situation. And so that's kind of the impetus to starting a new company to try to solve this problem.
Yeah. Well, and I've lived that. As many people that have listened to previous episodes know, I tore my Achilles last year.
Ugh,
And
brutal injury.
yeah. Um, but I tore it resulted from a previous, like, a calf injury that I tried to fight through, and then but the calf injury happened in December, right? And so I go into my physical therapist, who I know, and they were like, "Okay, well, do you want to file under insurance, or you want to do cash pay?" And I was like, "Well, it's December. My insurance is gonna, like I'm not at my deductible, so what's the difference?" And they were like, "Well, if you file through your insurance, it's $120 for the visit. If you cash pay, it's $100."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "What?
What?
What? Like, I'm not going to reach my deductible in the next 14 days. So, like, why would I pay to go through the insurance and cause everybody a hassle before they can actually get the money, or I just give you $100 right now?" Like, it's
It's crazy.
ridiculous.
It's crazy.
Um,
Well, I mean, people are like, why? Like, why is that the case?
yeah.
And so, just quickly, the case is your physical therapist has to bill the insurance company,
Mhm.
never really knowing what they're going to get paid. They
Right.
may not get paid for 3 or 6 months, and they have to have billing people to
Right.
actually do that. And so,
Yeah.
ultimately, it's like 30 or 40% of their revenue
Yeah.
gets sucked up in just administrative
Hmm.
bureaucracy. And so, when you go and say, "Hey, I'll pay you directly, with a credit card or whatever right
Hmm.
now," they're like, "Yeah, I'm willing to take a significant discount because I
Right.
don't want to have to fight to get paid." There's
Hmm.
a study that came out, like, I don't know, maybe it was 3 or 4 months ago now. Um, Time flies when you're having fun, so maybe it's a
Yeah.
little longer than that. But and they were saying that 2 weeks, or excuse me, 2 days out of every week, a doctor has to spend fighting health insurance. So that's
Oh my
getting
goodness.
pre-authorizations. That's, they submit a bill and it gets
Hmm.
declined. So they got to fight
Right.
that. And so, can you imagine, like, spending 2 days out of every work week just
Right.
fighting your employer, in
Yeah.
essence, like,
Yeah.
to get paid? Like, it's
Mhm.
wickedly inefficient.
Yeah.
And these doctors, the doctors that I've met, the vast majority of them, they're in business to want to, like, help people. Like, they want to
Yeah.
care for people. They have a God-given ability to do this really, really well, and
Right.
they don't want to spend their time fighting health insurance companies. So
Right.
they're willing to give you, significantly less if you pay them directly. The other benefit of this is if you pay your doctor directly, it's now between you and your doctor. There's
Right.
no other middlemen. There's not a government. There's not insurance. There's not your employer. It's
Right.
like you and your doctor can now do what's right for you as opposed to
Hmm.
what the insurance company thinks is right for you.
Right.
And so there's incredible amounts of freedom with that. And what we have found is when you go to your doctor and say, "Hey, I'm going to pay you directly," the doctor's like, "Praise God. This is
Right.
amazing. Like, let's
Right.
do this,
Yep.
and
Yep.
so it's just a way, way better system by, removing all those middlemen, which, is financially, better, and just,
Yep.
I think, physiologically better
Oh
because
yeah.
you can now treat your illness the way that you want to treat your illness.
Right. Well, and a lot of times, like, you can speed up the process too, because you don't
Yeah,
have
oh
to wait
yeah.
for pre-authorization. You don't have to wait for these, and to go back to my Achilles, because I had a injection put into it, because it was a tear, but it was interstitial, and so it didn't need surgery, thankfully. But the doctor was like, I mean, the insurance isn't going to cover this, so we can go through and try and get the authorization, have you sit there and wait for 2 or 3 weeks, fight, see if they're going to do da 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 da, or we can just do it today and start your recovery. And I was like, just do it. He's like, it's this much cash. I was like, I'll pay it. Just go. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Right. Let's start this recovery. And as opposed to, and of course, thankfully he knew, he's like, they're not gonna approve it because they're gonna say it's not necessary. You can just take time and heal. But he's like, I know you're an athlete. You don't have time. Like you
Yeah.
want to get back to life. And
Yeah.
and whether you're an athlete or not, but you want to get back to life. You don't want to stay sick. You don't want to be fighting these things, and you don't want to have to be like, okay, well, they can't see me until X date because, the insurance and all the way that things work. And it typically what happens that I've seen is like doctors, if you go like, I'm going to pay you cash, they're like, can we move you up to the top of the list?
Well, dude, you know what is so crazy? We've had a bunch of situations in which, you call the orthopedic surgeon and say, "Hey, I need a surgery on my knee or whatever."
Mhm.
And they're like, "Yeah, it's gonna be 3 weeks. What is your insurance?" And they say, "Oh, no, I'm paying directly." And they're like, "We can get you in next week."
Yeah.
It's like these doctors want
Hmm.
direct pay
Yeah.
patients because they're all trying to rid themselves of insurance
Hmm.
intervention. And so it's significantly better doing it this way.
Yeah. And so coming up with the plan of basically crowdfunding, right? Um, like how long did it take to get this implemented, and like what is the fight as far as like getting people to understand like, oh, this is how this works.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is that we've been, conditioned since we were young to
Hmm.
think like you have to have health insurance. If you
Hmm.
don't have health insurance, I mean, being uninsured is like such a crazy thing for people to understand. And in fact, we actually have t-shirts that say uninsured on the front,
Nice.
um, just to like show that this is not something you should be afraid of. In
Right.
fact, this is something you should embrace.
Yeah.
And so that's a really hard thing for people. Not having health insurance is not, the end of the world. And in
Right.
fact, we consider ourselves, delightfully uninsured,
Yeah.
because we are free from all of the craziness that comes with insurance.
Yeah.
There was another study, I think it was about a year and a half ago now, where it was like America's most hated industries. And one was government,
Hmm.
two was health insurance, and three was pharma. And
Nice.
so, people know that they hate this,
Yeah.
yet they're still willing to kind of comply with the cultural, social norms
Yeah.
and that health insurance is not the only way. There is another way.
Yeah.
And so, that's what we battle on a day-to-day basis. But now we have 10,000 members in our community.
Hmm.
The bills that have gotten paid are like 99.9% of the bills that are submitted to the community are funded,
Hmm.
as opposed to like 80% or something like that by health insurance companies.
Right.
One of the crazy stats that I learned after the fact that I got denied is one out of every five claims get denied by health
That's
insurance
crazy.
companies. And it's like I was just in Vegas last week for a team meeting, and it's like I feel like you go to the casino with,
Yeah.
health insurance. Like one out
Yeah.
of every five. Unfortunately, I was the one, and it
Yeah.
cost me $8,000, and people
Right.
don't realize that.
Yeah.
And it's back to incentives. These health insurance companies, they make more money if they deny your bill.
Yeah.
That's a pretty terrible incentive.
Right. Right. Well, and the other thing is that like it comes down to, okay, did the person in the billing department code it correctly based on what they saw in the doctor's notes and da. Because we've
Totally out of
gone
your
through
control.
that. Like,
Yeah,
because my wife and I both recently, a couple months ago, had our wellness visits, and we go in and my bill came back and it was like $29 after all the da 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 da. And hers is $100 more. We looked at them, the exact same test, the exact same everything. And because they coded it differently on hers, because she went in and complained about something, they coded it differently. And the insurance company said, no, we can't. And she's called the doctor and like, can y'all just change the code? Well, no, we can't really do that now. It's been too long. Like, and you actually did say that. And we're like, seriously? Like,
it's crazy.
it's ridiculous. And
It's crazy.
I get it from the doctor's standpoint, from the like they're like, you want me to take it out of my pocket now? Like, right? I'm like, okay. I mean, I get that as a self-employed business owner, right? I get people that ask me for discounts all the time, and I'm like, you're asking me to do the same thing I do for other people for less.
Hmm.
Like, you know, and so it is this web of like, okay, well, the doctors, yeah, they need to be paid. It's a fair rate and all that kind of stuff. But like you said, their cash rate oftentimes is a lot lower than what they're billing through the insurance company because they know the insurance company is going to reduce it and it's going to be this and it's going to be that. And then so they have to inflate everything knowing that those things are going to happen.
Yeah.
Um, whereas yeah, you just go in and I've done this, I've heard this from lab people too, where they're like, oh, if you need a drug test for something, you come in and you just do it. It's like you come in, it's $4. I'm like, really? It's $4 for that test? Because when I get my bill from, it's like $80 marked down, da 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 da. They go, yeah, well, we have to do that because we know they're going to throw in discounts and they're going to throw in this and that. But it legit costs us $4 to do the test. So,
It's a racket.
and I'm
It's
like,
a
oh my
total racket.
gosh, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, I get my test done twice a year, and I think with insurance, it's like $700, and now mine is like $100.
Right.
And or under $100 the last time I did it. So it's just it's craziness the way that this system is set up, and it's
Yeah.
unlike any other system, in our country where
Yeah.
what the price is, you can negotiate the price, for most things, or
Mhm.
and with healthcare, you just like you show up and they give you a price later, and they just expect you to pay it.
Right.
It's like I don't know what the right analogy is, but like you go buy a car and they're like, "Oh, we won't tell you the price later. We'll bill you," and
Right.
it's just like, what? Like,
Yeah.
when do we ever do this?
Yeah.
So we think that, price transparency is really, really important in what we
Hmm.
do. So you know what you're paying for before you get the service done. I think that's super important.
Right. And one of the things I saw on your website is regards to like the number of people that are, declaring bankruptcy a year because of
Oh,
medical bills. And that spurs the thought that, when you look at a credit report for like buying a house or something like that, they take off like when they're figuring out your debt and all that stuff, they're like, oh, you have bad medical bills or bad debt for medical. We'll take that off. We don't count that because like it's like this segment of life where it's like, okay, well, we're going to hurt you with it, but then we'll take it off and we won't hurt you with it, but we expect you to pay it. But oh, if you go talk to the hospital, maybe they'll give you a discount, or maybe they'll take it off, or maybe they'll waive it if you can prove certain circumstances. So it's like part of the world doesn't want it to hurt you, and the other part's like, oh, we're just going to stick it to you.
yeah. Well, depending on the year, it's somewhere between 200,000 and 250,000 families go bankrupt due to a medical expense, even though they have health insurance.
Yeah,
So, health insurance, you think, is insurance generally, right,
yeah,
is created so that you don't have financial distress.
right,
And so the fact that we have, between 200 and 250,000 families every year going bankrupt due to a medical expense is telling me that this is clearly not working. And
right.
so, why are you know, going bankrupt? One is, you have these huge deductibles.
Hmm.
I went this year on the Affordable Care Act plan just to see like what would my family have. And it was like $1,400 a month, and it was a $16,000 deductible,
Oh,
which means that like I'm out $30,000
right,
before the health insurance plan pays at the dime.
yeah,
And most Americans don't have $1,000 sitting in their bank accounts.
right,
So, if you have a big health event and you can't put up that deductible, then bankruptcy is in your future. So that's
right,
one. And then the second one we've already talked about, which is denied bills.
yeah,
It's, you go and you think that the health insurance plan, and many times the insurance plan says, I will pay for it. And then after the fact, they say, whoa, never mind, we won't pay for it.
yeah,
And that's a pretty scary thing too for people.
yeah,
The other third one, which is absolutely crazy town to me, is if you have health insurance and you go to an in-network hospital, not everybody who works at that hospital is in network. So, for example, your anesthesiologist may not be in network, which means you have to pay for the anesthesiologist.
right,
Your health insurance plan is not paying for that.
right,
And so, you're sitting there on a table, God forbid it's an ER visit, you may not
hmm,
even be conscious.
yeah,
You have no decision-making capacity. And
yeah,
an anesthesiologist comes in who's out of network, can bill you whatever they want, and you
hmm,
have to pay for it. I mean,
yeah,
it's total crazy town.
yeah,
And and that's ultimately what we're trying to solve.
right. And so the crowdfunding piece of it, like obviously there's still a you have to have some skin in the game, right? So you're paying something monthly. Um, but then if you have that big event, you have a kid that falls out of a tree, breaks their arm, you got to go to the ER, all of a sudden you're like, okay, well, I've got all this. And like you said, in that instance where it's like, okay, if my deductible is so high, I know I'm paying for the whole thing,
Yeah,
right? And God forbid it happens in like November, and it's like, okay, I'm never going to hit my deductible, and if something happens in January, I've got to start all over again,
exactly.
right? And so explain how
Or even a
how
worst case scenario, if you go into the ER in November and you need continuing treatment in January, you're
Mhm.
paying for all of that because your deductible renews at the beginning
Right,
of the year, which
right,
is also very, very crazy to me.
yeah,
Don't get hurt on December 31st because
right,
you're toast. You're times two
yeah,
on those deductibles.
right,
So yeah, it's a scary thing for people, and I think that we're seeing this like societally that people are like done with it.
yeah,
And that's ultimately fueling my business.
mhm,
And for us, it's like you pay $500 for a health event,
mhm,
not per year. So if you fall out of the tree and break your arm, it's $500.
right,
If you get cancer, it's $500. And that's for the lab, the doctor visits, the surgeries, the prescriptions, everything
right,
is considered one health event. So you're paying the first $500 of that.
mhm,
It's not like every doctor visit you pay the first 500. It's every
right,
health event. And we
right,
do that because, yeah, we want people to have a little skin in the game.
sure,
And we figure that everybody can come up with $500. You can figure
mhm,
out a way to come up with $500. And the last thing we
right,
want when you're in the ER is like, oh, holy crap, like I can't afford this.
mhm,
When our members go to the ER, they're like, okay, I got to come up with $500. I can do that. Now let's
mhm,
focus on my health.
right,
We can
right,
refocus on health as opposed to the financial consequences of me being in the ER with something that could be tragic.
yeah,
And so that's I think ease of mind for a lot of people that they don't have to
mhm,
put up, 10 or $15,000 or whatever before the health
right,
insurance plan will pay.
right,
Your vacation for the next year is now gone because your
yeah,
child has a hole in her eardrum.
yeah,
That's a pretty challenging place to be for
yeah,
most Americans.
right. Well, and then you also get to the point of like, I don't want to go in because I know this is going to lead to something that's going to be expensive and I can't afford that. So I'm not going to go to the doctor. I'm just
Yeah,
going to see if I can wait it out.
there's a crazy stat. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's something like 40 or 50% of Americans have delayed healthcare because they can't afford it. So it's
Oh,
like it's like they're not going and getting health care. They can't afford it, which
mhm,
means their illness or injury, whatever it may be, is delayed.
yeah,
They're delaying getting care. I'm like, man, that's the last thing that we should be doing is trying
right,
to throttle care
right,
because, people can't pay for it. Because also
mhm,
oftentimes it gets worse and worse and worse. And so
right,
our expenses for sure as a country are going up because people are delaying care and allowing their illness or injury or whatever to get worse.
right,
We saw it in Canada or in COVID where people couldn't get in to have their ACL repaired
yeah,
for like 18 months. And at that point, like you've done some pretty extensive
oh yeah,
damage to your knee
yeah,
because your ACL is not repaired. So
mhm,
yeah, it's a tragedy in our system, and so our members don't deal with that. It's $500. Like I said, it's worth it.
yeah,
$500 is worth it to go get your care done
yeah,
done now. And it's one of the benefits of our service.
right. Well, and like you said, you can move on and start worrying, not worrying, but thinking about your health and how you're going to recover and how you're going to, and it takes that additional stressor off of your life.
Yeah.
In a time when most Americans and a lot of people around the world are financially stressed on a day-to-day basis,
Hmm.
they
Hmm.
don't, there's no freedom to just be able to be like, okay, I can handle a $1,000 event if it comes up in the next 3 days. Most people that sends them into 3 or 4 or 5 weeks or months worth of stress and anxiety and what that does to your health on the back end can take years to recover from.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Like I said, it's a total tragedy. It
Yeah.
really is. I mean, something has to be done.
Yeah.
And I think that most people are looking to our legislators to say, you've got to do something about it. And it's very, very clear to me. I think it's clear to most people that the legislators aren't going to get it done. Like
Mhm.
there's no iterative
Yeah.
changes even to our system
Yeah.
that are going to enable us to be recovered from
Right.
this. And so, from our perspective, it's like, look, we gotta, burn down the existing system, burn down
Mhm.
the existing way of doing things, start
Yeah.
again in a way that's much more, patient focused.
Mhm.
We're kind of calling it autonomous healthcare. It's like it's giving sovereignty back to the individual, focused on the
Right.
patient,
Right.
and in allowing the patient to be, the driver of this as opposed to the system being the driver of this. And so,
Yeah.
that's ultimately what we're focused on.
Well, and you're seeing that doctors are making that change too. There's several doctors in my
Oh
area
yeah,
that have opened up practices. They're like, we don't do insurance. We bill you a monthly to be a part of the practice. You come in whenever you need it. You call whenever you need it, right? And it's just like it's a low entry fee, monthly membership plan. Um, and and it's like, okay, well, by the time you get, and they've got their discounts worked out with, labs and hospitals and x-rays and
yeah.
all that kind of stuff, and so it's like, you can see people that are waking up to it and going, okay, wait, there's a better way to do it. But I think, like you said, the government's not going to make the change because they've got their own health insurance plan that's bringing them money. So why would they, like, what's going to, be their impetus to say, oh, let's throw away all this profit that we're getting from Medicare and things, because that's leading the way, and the other health insurance companies are just taking that as an
Oh yeah.
example and following.
And they're getting tons of money from these health insurance companies, hospital systems, pharmaceutical companies.
Mhm.
Like, look at all of these guys and what they're getting from these companies,
Right,
in their reelection campaigns.
right.
So, they're getting money. And the other thing too is, at least on the House of Representatives side, oftentimes these folks are, their constituents, largest employer, the largest employers in a lot of cities, in most cities, is the hospital.
Oh
And
yeah.
so who are they
Mhm.
going to stand up for?
Right.
The patient or the hospital?
Hmm.
And it looks great from the outside.
Right.
We're supporting the hospital and it's great. It's
Hmm.
funny to me how all these big donors give to these hospitals to get their names on the plaque,
Hmm.
not realizing that these hospitals are fleecing people,
Right.
left and right,
Yeah.
thinking that they're doing something good. And it's just like, no, 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 no. Like, this is not, the fact that the hospital is going to charge me. I was unfortunately in the ER a year and a half ago or so, and for a metabolic panel, they
Hmm.
charged me, I think it was like $300, where
Yeah.
I can go to the local place and get a metabolic panel for, I think, $6 or
Hmm.
$5, something like
Hmm.
that. I'm just like, how is this good for
Yeah.
humanity that
Yeah.
I'm paying, whatever, 30 to 50 times, what I could get down the road just because I'm doing it
Right.
at a hospital? I mean, that feels like, to some extent, extortion,
Yeah.
because they bill you later and they say you have to pay for it. And I had
Hmm.
no say in what I could get or couldn't get, or, where I got my labs from or anything like
Right.
that. So
Right.
it's a racket. I call it a cartel because I think that's an accurate assessment of what's going on in the healthcare industry.
Yeah.
You have these pharmaceutical companies, these hospitals, and the insurance plans who are all in cahoots,
Oh yeah.
to really see prices go up. And I think that's the biggest misconception in healthcare is, because people are like, healthcare is so complex. Like, why are prices going up? And I was like, look, it's not that complex. You've got the buyer of healthcare,
Hmm.
who want these are the health insurance plans. They actually want the price to go up because
Right.
what happens is there's this law that basically says that insurance companies can't make more than 15% of your premiums
Hmm.
to use for their administrative price, their cost and profit. So
Right.
if I have $1,000 premium, they can only make $150. So how do they grow their profit from 10% from 100 to 165? Well, guess
Yeah.
what? Your premium has to go from 1,000 to 1,100. So they
Right.
actually want the prices to go up over time.
Yeah.
And so the buyers of healthcare want the prices to go up. The sellers of healthcare, which are these big hospital systems, they clearly
Yeah.
want the price to go up.
Right.
So I kind of joke, it doesn't take a PhD in economics to understand when the buyer and the seller both
Yeah.
want the price to go up, the price is going up.
Yeah.
And there's no countering force. There's no countering market force to
Right.
push those prices down
Yeah.
because patients are kind of like, well, the insurance plan is going to pay for it anyway. So what do I really care?
Right.
What kind of care?
Right.
What do I care what kind of car I'm going to buy? Why
Yeah.
would I buy the little, Chevy whatever when I can go and buy the BMW? I'm going to
Yeah.
buy the BMW, right?
Right. Right.
So there's just no countering forces to keep these prices down. And so that's ultimately the problem that we have in healthcare.
Right. Well, and then you add in the fact that, that depending on the plan you're on, you can only go to certain doctors. And so,
Exactly.
and we had that happen in where I live, where there's two different hospital systems and a group of doctors left one to go to the other. And so and my wife worked for the one that they left. And so she was on their hospital system's healthcare plan, right? And so we were on it as a family because I was self-employed. And so I was like, okay, we're on her healthcare plan. And they were like, oh, you can't go to those doctors anymore, or we're going to charge you an extra $30,000 before your deductibles met. And we were like, what? Like, and so we
Crazy.
had to leave, and we were at the best doctor in town. We had to leave that doctor and go to somebody else. And then once she left that system and now working for a medical device company, now it was like, we went right back. We're like, can you get us back in? He goes, oh, yeah, you're back in,
Yeah.
and it's just
It's
like,
crazy.
and because you're at you're under what they think is best instead of being able to make a choice, right? And it's really sad, and it leads you to, and I've got family members that have been like, oh, I don't like this doctor. They don't tell me what I want to hear, or they don't give me options, or they don't do this or that. And I'm like, well, go somewhere else. Well, we can't because they're the only one in network,
Yeah.
and it's
Well,
like,
yeah, and what people don't realize is that most healthcare transactions are business to business transactions.
mhm,
It's between a health insurance company and a hospital or a health insurance company and a doctor's office. And so this business to business transaction, you, the patient, you are not a party to this transaction.
right,
Um, I always say, like, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product, and
yeah,
ultimately we, the
right,
patients, are the product of the system
yeah,
being negotiated between hospital systems and health insurance companies. And
hmm
so people are like, I get these explanation of benefits in the mail and I don't understand them. Like they make no sense. Like a
yeah,
lot of times the math doesn't add up. And
right,
I'm like, yeah, because it doesn't have to for you because
yeah,
you're not a party to this transaction.
hmm
If Apple were to send you something and it wasn't clear what you were paying for, you'd be like, hell no. Like,
right,
I'm going to call Apple, I'm going to go on Twitter or I'm going to go on social Instagram or whatever and complain about this.
yeah,
It just doesn't happen in healthcare because
yeah,
you're not actually paying for the product or the service.
hmm
You are the product or the service,
right,
unfortunately. And so, I think, again, what we're trying to do is be like, no, 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 the patient, you are in control
hmm
of your healthcare. And as such, it should be all like very intuitive. The numbers that you get should match up. Like the math,
right,
like, third grade math should actually, this plus this equals this. I had a buddy, I went to Stanford and he was like number two in our class. So he's like a wickedly smart guy.
right,
And he's like, there's only one thing on this planet that confuses me. And I don't doubt this. He's like, it's health insurance. He's like,
yeah,
I get these things in the mail. I'm like, I can't even do the math. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. And I'm
right,
like, if you can't understand healthcare, imagine, like who the normal human being like me
right,
can't understand it. So
yeah,
it's created to be opaque.
yeah,
It's created to create confusion. In confusion, there is profit,
right,
unfortunately. And so, from my perspective, it's downright evil. And
yeah.
we're trying to correct that.
Well, and I love the analogy of the fact that you explained it the way that you business to business, because a lot of people, and I would have told you, like, I'm the consumer. I'm going to the doctor. I'm the consumer. But I'm not. If I'm paying cash, I'm the consumer now,
Yes,
because I'm like, I am paying. I want the best for what my money can buy. Well, I've got $500. I've got $700. What's the best treatment plan that I can get for this money? What are you willing to do? And we negotiate from
absolutely.
there, right? And and that's, when people hear about people going to Mexico or Panama or Guatemala or whatever to get surgeries done because, they're either, you know, borderline accepted here in the States, or they're still, but it's cash pay. It's like, oh, I'm gonna, and people are like, I need this done, but I can't come up with $5,000 plus the flight down there, plus the,
Yeah.
right? Um, but it's, you look at your insurance here and they're like, oh, we'll do it, but it's going to be, you got to pay your deductible, you got to pay da 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 da. And yeah, you're looking at like a 15 or $20,000 bill at the
Yeah.
end of it,
Yeah.
you know? And
Funny enough, we had a member who was in Wisconsin, and he had a heart arrhythmia, and so he was working out, and his heart just started going beating
mhm,
super super fast. I think it was like over, was it over 200? It was like over 200 like beats
mhm.
per minute. It was like crazy. And so he went to the ER, and they're like, yeah, we need to get this fixed. It's gonna be $86,000 to get this
Cool.
fixed.
Nice.
And so he calls us. They got it under control.
Mhm.
You can take meds to get it under
Yeah.
control, but he
Yeah.
had a procedure, and
Right.
he calls us. He's like, "I'm so sorry, guys. Like, I just joined, and it's $86,000." And we're like, "Well, can we take a look and just see what else is out there?"
Hmm.
And we found a doctor in Chicago, which was like 90 miles away, that would do it for $44,000.
Hmm.
So 90 miles away, a
Yeah.
$40,000 difference.
Yep.
We found another doc who actually does more of these procedures than almost anybody else in the country in Oklahoma, so 1,000 miles away, that would do it for $22,000.
Hmm.
And so we called the patient, like, look, I'll give you $2,500. I'll put you on first class flights. I'll put you up in the nicest hotel room in Oklahoma if
Yeah.
you'll go and do it there. He's like, sure.
Yep.
So you saved like $50,000 or something like that all in. I think it was
Right.
more than that, almost $60,000. After all of these expenses, and
Yeah.
went and did it, and it's just like it shows you how messed up our system is that
Right.
for anything else you would travel 1,000 miles to save 50 or $60,000. Like that's a
Right.
pretty great return.
Yeah.
In healthcare, you know ultimately you won't. And fortunately we can incentivize them to go and do that.
Hmm.
But and then you go down to Mexico or Panama, or some of these other places, and it was probably $10,000.
Right.
And so that's how screwed up our
Yep.
system is that you can just you
Yep.
can go just 1,000 miles or 2,000 miles and get these things for 1/10 of the cost almost.
Right. Yep. Um, and then, but it's different. And I know some people are going to be listening to this and going, okay, well, because we tried one of those medical sharing companies
Yeah,
in the past, right? And
me too.
so it's different from that. Um, but explain like how that, like the difference between the two, because medical sharing is not health insurance either.
Right. Right. Yeah, I mean, a lot of these medical sharing, I mean, you and I talked about one before we got on. I don't know if you want to mention the name, but like,
Mhm.
a lot of these medical sharing organizations are also built on networks.
Right.
So, and they oftentimes use the same networks as the health plans. So they're
Right.
actually just renting out a health plan network.
Right.
So in essence, what's happening is you're paying the same prices as the health insurance plan. And
Hmm.
our whole system is built upon paying the price of direct pay.
Right.
And like I said, so our members are getting about 50% better prices than United
Hmm.
Healthcare is getting,
Wow.
by utilizing this direct pay method.
Yeah.
And so by getting into these networks, you're basically eliminating all benefits you have by
Yeah.
direct paying. You're stuck in the network, so you
Hmm.
don't get to choose what doctor you want to go to.
Right.
The big difference between us and even the health shares that aren't on networks is we actually will negotiate these bills for you.
Hmm.
So, we don't ask you to, call your doctor and negotiate the bill. We do ask you to say, hey, I'm a direct pay patient. What is the direct pay price?
Right.
But for some of the big ones, like you go to the ER, God forbid, or you have a
Hmm.
NICU baby who's in the NICU for months and months and months.
Right.
All you have to do with us is you get these bills. They'll send you the bills after the fact.
Hmm.
You upload them to our app, and then we've got a team of negotiation folks that will actually negotiate that bill on your behalf.
Yeah.
So we're getting these bills down drastically by actually actively negotiating. If
Yeah.
you have a big surgery coming up, all we ask is like, hey, call us so that, we can find you a great doc who's willing to give you a cash pay price.
Right.
We had a woman tear her ACL playing pickleball of all
Hmm.
things,
Hmm.
and said, the hospital wants to send me to this orthopedic surgeon is $24,000. I think 22 or $24,000. I can't remember the details. we're like, hey, can we look around? And we found another doctor who's in Austin. She was in Austin,
Hmm.
who does a lot of the joints for the University of Texas
Hmm.
athletic program. So he's really, really good,
Yeah.
who would do it for $12,000. So
Right.
half the price,
Yep.
great doctor, better location. And so we just take a very kind of active approach in helping our members go to really great doctors at really
Hmm.
affordable prices. And all the health shares, they just don't do that. And
Yeah.
so, in fact, some of our hardest members are ones that come from health shares because they go out and they'll pay, $40,000 for a hip replacement. They'll pay for it out of their pocket and they'll come back to us and say, "Hey, help us with this bill that we just paid." And we're like,
Right.
"Dude, we could have gotten you that for like $22,000. Like,
Right.
don't do that."
Yeah.
So that's the
Yeah.
one thing that we just ask you to do is like call us before you do this because we
Right.
will probably be able to find you a really great doctor at a lower price, or we can negotiate on your behalf
Right.
and get a significantly lower price. And so
Yeah.
that's just something that health shares are not doing.
No.
And then in addition to that, on the back end, all of our members are funding each other directly, and we can go in the
Hmm.
mechanics if you want to, but every month I'm asked to help somebody like Jerry,
Hmm.
who has this health event. And so my money goes directly from my bank account to Jerry's bank account. We
Right.
don't get in the middle of that. And it's cool because now I know I'm helping Jerry with his
Right.
ACL tear,
Right.
as opposed to sending it to United Healthcare or even sending it to a health share and
Yep.
having no idea, how this money is being used. And
Right.
so
Right.
I actually feel great every month because I get to help somebody else out in the community,
Yeah.
directly. Just a really quick example of this is, our number one cost in the community is pregnancies. Number
Hmm.
two is active injuries. And unfortunately, with pregnancy, you have miscarriages.
Right.
So you send out a request for miscarriages, and we have, inevitably we have women who respond to us and are like,
Hmm.
I know what this family is going through. I know the pain. I know the
Hmm.
heartbreak. Like instead of the $100 you want me to ask, to send them, can I send them $200? And
Right.
I was just like, you would never in a million years you call United Healthcare and be like, can I send you more money this month?
Right. Right.
But we actually are like,
Yeah.
what we say is like, fund humans, not health insurance,
Yeah.
because you're actually funding other human beings directly as opposed to funding, the yacht for the United Healthcare CEO.
Yeah.
And so that's a huge differentiator between us and the vast majority of health shares don't do that either. So
Right.
we are very, very different. We're not a health share. We're not faith-based. We have tons of people of faith in our community. I'm a person of faith, but that's not who we are. You don't have to be a faith-based community.
Right.
You don't
Right.
have to get your pastor's signature. None of
Yeah.
that's kind of
Yeah.
craziness to be a part of our community. So we're trying to
Yeah.
open this up to everybody as well.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple things I want to hit that you mentioned that, but my wife and I had miscarriages, so that struck a chord with me. So, um, and there's nothing worse than getting to that point, having a miscarriage, and then getting home and then getting a bill for going into the doctor to like, and you're like, oh my gosh, like,
Yeah,
you know,
for
um,
thousands of dollars
yeah, and you're
for
like,
for a
and
miscarriage.
it didn't work, right?
Yeah,
As far as the ending that you wanted from it,
psychologically, you're already in a really devastating place, and
yep,
then financially, you become in a devastating
right,
place, and it's just like that ain't right.
yep,
That's just not right.
yep, yep,
So, and for that, and for miscarriage, you're down $500. I mean,
yep,
again, it's like, and that sucks too.
yeah,
But it is what it is. But at least we can eliminate the pain, the financial pain associated
right,
with something that's already
yeah,
psychologically,
yeah,
painful.
right,
My wife and I, we lost our firstborn 10 hours after she was born.
mm,
Devastating. But then
yeah,
you get the hospital bills and it's $25,000
yeah,
for a baby that you left at the hospital never to see again.
right,
Like that's a brutal thing that we as Americans should not have to
right,
deal with.
right. But one of the other things that I want it for people that don't understand how big negotiations work, right? And like in setting things that like big businesses and how pricing and all that. And like to me, like you said earlier, you said there's 10,000 people in the organization, right? 10,000
Mhm.
people. And you're negotiating things at a better rate than United Healthcare.
Yeah, that
Like
have, $500 billion, that
that's
10% of all of our healthcare expenses go through United Healthcare.
right. That probably every American, if they're getting employment, getting insurance through their employment in their lifetime, probably every American has been a customer of United Healthcare at one point.
Either directly or indirectly, you're probably a
Right.
customer of United.
Right. And so with such a small base of people, you're able to do that. One, it tells me how good it works, right? And as far as like the people that you've got an understanding of how the system works and how to talk to the hospitals or doctors or whoever you're negotiating with. Um, but two, it tells me how much the other side of it's willing to negotiate down to that because they know they're getting cash right away.
Yeah, yeah. And we've we've had something like 20 or 30,000 bills that we've gone through the entire system with.
Hmm. Hmm.
And only once out of 20,000 have we found a doctor not wanting to take cash. As in one of those Looney Tune northeastern states who,
Hmm.
just a little bit loony in terms of how they think, but is
Right.
once.
Right.
And I can tell you there are 1,000 times that the number of times where you go into the doctor and pay in cash, and they're like delighted,
Yeah.
delighted that you're paying them.
Hmm.
And so it gives over a little bit of a hurdle where people have to go in and say, "Hey, I'm a self-pay. I'm a direct pay
Right.
patient."
Right.
It's much easier to throw down your insurance card, but we
Yeah.
found like if you're willing to take that little step up front, it
Hmm.
saves you a ton of headache on the
Right.
back end.
Right.
Because, you hear of people who have an ER visit or whatever, and then a year, 18 months, sometimes 2 years later, they still are getting bills
Oh
for
yeah.
this health event.
Yeah.
And for us, it's like, hey, anytime you get a bill in the mail, take a picture of it via the app. We'll take care of it. You
Hmm.
don't have to fret about it. Let us deal with it.
Yeah.
And that's it's peace of mind for people
Yeah.
that they don't have to worry about a bill coming a
Right.
year or 2 years later, which is
Right.
just ridiculous to me.
Yeah. No, it is. And I mean, I've experienced that. I'm sure, a lot of people listening to this have experienced that. Is you get a bill and you're like, what the heck is this for? And you look
Yeah,
at
you don't even
the
know what it's
service, you
for.
look at the service state and you're like, what in the world? Like,
Or you
yeah,
get a bill for the same thing like two or three times
yeah,
with different prices on it. You're like,
right.
what the hell's going on here?
Yep. Yep.
So that's the craziness of our
Yep.
system.
Yep.
Just upload it. We'll let us take care of it. Let us
Yeah.
do that heartache for you.
Yeah.
And it's just yeah, it's just a way better way of doing things from our
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah. So I know we're running out of time here, so I want to give you the opportunity to tell people how to find Crowd Health, how to stay like maybe they want to know a little bit. Like, do y'all post stuff on social media and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, just real quick, for if you're a single individual, it's about 195 bucks a month.
Hmm.
55 of that comes to us. We're a subscription-based business, so we
Hmm.
have no incentive to see your bills decline. And
Right.
then the rest of that money is you have the option of sending that to another person in the community. So it's about 195 bucks. And in fact, the bills have been so low for us lately. We've only asked for 150 of that
Mm.
195 over the
Nice.
last couple of months. And so, when the community does well, you actually get to keep the money as opposed to a
Right.
health insurance profiting. So
Right.
it's a way different model than health insurance. But if you want to learn more about how it works, join crowdhealth.com is the best place to go. And we're very active on, X and Instagram and
Right.
LinkedIn and Facebook and all those kinds of things. And so, we have posts daily
Hmm.
around, tips and tricks on how to beat the healthcare system,
Right.
which I think people will find pretty valuable. And that's
Yeah.
our handle on every social media platform is Join Crowd Health.
Okay. Awesome. And I'll put that in the show notes so people can click on it quickly and get to them. Um, is there anything else that we didn't hit on before we wrap up that you'd like? Okay, people need to know this about the healthcare system and attacking it. I'm sure there's a lot, but
Yeah, I'll give you just one trick that hopefully is worth the time for your
hmm.
people listening. When you go into the ER or the doctor's office, you'll get pages and pages of things to fill out. We've
Hmm.
all seen them. They're a clipboard or they're an
Right.
iPad. One of those pages is the personal financial responsibility form.
Hmm.
In essence, what we typically do is we just sign it and move on. But what I'm asking people to do is read it because
Hmm.
there's a line in there, every single one that says you are personally financially responsible
Right.
regardless of what they charge you for this bill. In essence, by signing that, you are giving your life away to this hospital to be able to charge whatever they want.
Right.
If you get it in a paper format, put a line through it and just say reasonable expenses and
Hmm.
then sign it. If you get it in an iPad format or some electronic format, just at the bottom of that page, write don't or won't sign.
Hmm.
And every time they're not paying attention. And so you're not giving your life away to that
Right.
hospital. It's a huge trick. It can save you literally tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that we'll put on our social media platform to help people understand how to kind of beat this system that
Yeah.
is set up to beat you.
Yeah.
And so just one thing, and again, join crowdhealth.com and join CrowdHealth on all our social media platforms. There's lots of good information there. Even if you're not a CrowdHealth member, we try to
Right.
educate people on how to beat this system.
Right. That's awesome. No, and I love that tip because I actually do remember seeing that and going, oh, okay. Well, I mean, what am I getting? What option do I have? Right? Like, I
You
want
don't
to
have
see
to
the
sign it.
doctor.
Don't let them bull
Like,
you into
you know,
signing it.
yeah,
And if you go to the ER, by the way, there's a rule, there's a law that says they
yeah,
have to treat you the same
right,
regardless of your insurance status. So
right,
they cannot say no to you if you don't sign that paper. So
right.
don't feel like you're getting bullied by the system.
Yeah,
You're the one that has the power. And so, take advantage of that in those situations. So,
yeah,
yeah, it's just a quick trick to
yeah,
beat the system in a situation typically when you're getting beat up pretty good by the system.
right. Well, Andy, I want to thank you so much. It's been like hugely educational, great conversation. Thank you for being a guest.
Thanks, Jerry.
Thanks for checking out the Confidence Through Health podcast. Please subscribe, post a review, share this episode with those you love who need a little extra help with their health journey. Visit allinhealthandwellness.com to learn more about the coaching programs that I provide. All episodes are produced by the Social Media Cowboys, your source for all online marketing needs. Go to socialmediacowboys.com for more information.